Hello and welcome to another edition of the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and joining me on this Monday night is Bob Ferrante, Mark Salva, and Jerry Cutts. Guys, here to talk a little FSU football after losing to Clemson 29-13 on Saturday night at Doak Campbell Stadium. Of course, I don't think that I was writing down some notes to talk to you guys about before this, and I don't think I've ever been a part of, since we were doing this since 2019, and maybe since I started following Florida State football in 1980. I don't think I've ever heard such positivity after a loss, and of course the reason for that is the performance of Brock Glenn, and we're going to cover a bunch of items, and we're going to go through offense and defense. But I have not talked to Bob or Jerry. Obviously, Mark joined us on Saturday night after the game. But before we get into specific individuals and sides of the ball, just your overall thoughts on the game, Bob.
Yeah, I think you guys said it Saturday night. No moral victories. You know, you're 1-5. You are what you are, and there's a ton of warts. It felt like there was energy on the field, especially on offense, that was really, really missing for 5 games. The defensive regression definitely bothers me. I think they are what they are in a lot of regards. But you felt like there were a lot of plays out there to be had. Got to catch the ball, got to block better, can't commit the penalties. But it felt like an offense that could have gotten out of the teens, been stuck in the teens for what now 5 straight games. It felt like there were some baby steps from a lot of these younger guys too.
Yep. Jerry, what about you?
Yeah, I felt what Bob just said, baby steps. I mean, I was sitting in the Champions Club, and I spent most of the game either sitting with Jesse Solomon or Marvin Jones, and had 5 or 6 former players that were around me. And, you know, it's just tough to watch Florida State look like that. But there was energy. And I felt like the crowd fed on it. Brock, you know, showed us a spark, some life in the passing game. And if we can complete, you know, a couple of those 50-50 balls, his numbers are, you know, kind of pretty impressive. But, of course, you can't complete them right now. You don't have guys that are doing that. So we are who we are. Yep. And just take the next week and try to get 2% better.
Yeah, listen, you know, as I went back and watched it all day yesterday and a little bit this morning, I was even more impressed with Brock's performance than I was watching it live. He was the only source of offense on this team. If you take away that Maurice Smith's bad snap that lost 17 yards that credited to Brock's rush yardage, he would have been your leading rusher in the game. He was the only thing that had FSU had going in that game. You know, listen, the notes I had on him were tough, decisive, competes, confident, leads by example, enjoys football, has a little gunslinger to him, and they're gonna have to get that out of him. But you know, Mark, you know, I know you've had a chance to watch the game, and the question I want to ask you guys is, why did it take so long to get here? How is this not more blatantly obvious to Mike and his staff? There were people that go to this practice that said that this quarterback competition was not a runaway the way it was presented when the season started. You probably would have had a chance to be more competitive against Boston College when we first knew there was an issue with this offense. But listen, totally impressed with the kid. I thought he had a chance to give a spark with this offense. I think he exceeded my expectation in what he provided, Mark.
So Brock is what I think you would characterize as a gamer. I'm sure in practice, things are so controlled, so not spontaneous. Everything's scripted in practice. You script situations, you script down at distances, you script the defense you face, and you kind of go through, you kind of set it up for success in some ways, or, you set up for failure so you can learn from it, kind of deal. But the spontaneity is oftentimes taken out in practice. And I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. We practice so fast. There are times I think you need to stop and teach, and times you need to just let it go. We had, I don't know, what, 3 or 4 scrimmages leading up to the season. 3, and so I'm sure that probably manifested itself. But so the answer is, why not sooner? I'm guessing that the things that made Brock really good on Saturday, the spontaneity, the competitiveness, all that stuff in a practice setting probably really doesn't come out as much and as obvious. And for whatever reason, we stuck to it. I think we all said it, though. We've been saying it for weeks, that you need to get him in the game to see what he has, because it wasn't working the other way, totally. And why that didn't happen sooner, Mike has evaded that question for 6 weeks now. Yeah. And but it is what it is. I mean, he was so much better than what we've been watching. And I put the 3 things that I noticed on Saturday was, he was decisive, which to me is probably the most important one. He was accurate. Yep. I mean, he put some balls in some tight windows, some hard situations, and he was evasive and mobile, which the running quarterback, just that part of it made it that much better. So yeah, it's blatantly obvious in that performance. And look, he went against Clemson, which is probably one of the top defenses in our conference, them in Miami, right? He's done it against Georgia, or he played against Georgia. He didn't do much, but against Louisville in a situation that was really, really hard, and in Florida, right, a little bit after Tate was out, right? So he's been in as hard of situations as he could possibly been in, and it can't get any harder for him right now. So from here on, really, it's downhill for him, right? I mean, Notre Dame on the road will be tough, Miami on the road will be tough.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's not a tough one. I think they're all tough outside of Charleston Southern.
Yeah, well, they are. But Clemson is probably one of the better defenses, that we're going to face. Notre Dame and Miami are not, tons better than those two. So, yeah, it's obvious.
Yeah, listen, like I said, he surprised me a little bit. I thought there would be a spark from him just because of the way he does practice. Listen, I'm firmly convinced that if DJ had not gotten hurt, he would still be the starting quarterback and Brock would be sitting the bench. I hate that that's the way this thing had to play out. I don't understand the stubbornness and not giving him a chance early. That's cost this team. I hope now they got 2 weeks to figure it out. And listen, I think my favorite play, and I think it shows you a little bit about who this guy is as a player and why this team may get a bump moving forward in the season. You go back to that 4th and 9 in the fourth quarter where he ran the ball, got tattooed, and you could tell right away that he was at the very least shaken up and wasn't sure if he was getting up, and he willed himself off the ground in an era where we see players lay on the field like they're getting paid to do it. I don't know if you guys watched the Ole Miss game. I think that was done for a different reason, but you see guys on this football team, every football team around, when they're in pain, they stay on the ground, not when they're hurt. That guy got up on the field, told Mike Norvell he was not coming out of the game, and I think that's got a chance to help give him even more credibility in the locker room with this offense and with this defense. And if he's going to show that kind of physical toughness, maybe we'll see some more of that out of other folks on the squad. But Bob, what are your thoughts on taking 5 games to get there? Is it what it is thing, or do you have questions about it?
I've had questions about it for weeks. I think Brock should have been given some amount of playing time. We talked about the whole bridge quarterback thing with DJU. It obviously went nowhere. I don't know, when you see the games aren't going your way, you can't get a lead. You don't feel like you can get a backup quarterback, and they have to manufacture a drive, insert him into a drive and get him some playing time. I honestly think a lot of guys from Brock Glenn on down to Andre Otto to receivers and tight ends would have performed better against Clemson if they had more playing time leading up to Clemson. This is a Brock Glenn discussion, but to me, it's all the players around him too. We would have seen a better performance out of these guys had they gotten that time against, pick your team, a Memphis, a Cal, an SMU. Pat, it makes me wonder to some extent, was Cal that attractive nuisance? You got the win and it made you feel like, well, it worked out, even though the score was ugly. It worked out. So then you try to make it work again against SMU, and then the staff sees, well, SMU is just a you-know-what show. Well, now we got to pull the plug and go with all these younger guys, including Brock.
Yeah, and I think part of it was that SMU had not looked particularly good in its first two games. It took them a while to get going. I think that might have played a factor in that decision. But once the offense was struggling, I think he should have gone in the game. And listen, he finally got in the game for whatever reason. And, I guess I hate to say it's good news that he was able to start. It's good news for the football team. I feel awful for any kid that gets hurt. You don't like to see that for anybody. But Jerry, what was your overall impression of Brock in this game, and why do you think maybe he was not playing earlier?
Well, my impression was he was very good. Everything you guys said is on point. And Mark's comments about being a gamer, he didn't distinguish himself at practice that it was obvious he should be the starter, nor did DJ. Yep. You know what I'm saying? They both kind of struggled at practice to an extent. Maybe we need to bring the marching chiefs and 50,000 people to practice to see who can do it on game day.
Hey,
but the one
like
thing I will say, Mark, and Pat, you've been on a coaching staff. You've been, and Bob's been around a long time. Coaches aren't usually going to tell you why they make these decisions. And there may be stuff that we don't have access to that would explain it clearly. I don't like the decision. I think we're all on the same page. Yep. Let's go take a look at what Brock can do. But coaches oftentimes make decisions for reasons that they don't want the press to know. And, I mean, that's been my experience. I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that.
I think you're definitively right about that. I think we've reached an era where you have to explain to people why you're playing so-and-so, because you're paying one guy this and one guy that. I'm not saying that was the totality of that decision, but there's some certainly you have to explain to people why we're paying so-and-so X number of dollars and he's sitting on the bench. I think that, and I'm not saying that's part of it, but you want to talk about something that we would never be told. That is one of the things that we would never be told. And I know from talking to people that are in college football that is a pressure that they feel. They do have to answer to people. I do think that you ought to take the long-term view in that particular case and look at the health of the program, not only this year, but that years down the road. And I think maybe some of this decision was short-sighted, in my opinion. And listen, as you guys said, there was no clear delineation between the two in practice. And maybe there would have been if they had practice where there was tackling and he was able to show some of the things that he does when it's full-scale football, because he showed me a little bit of Danny McManus, Casey Weldon on Saturday night with the toughness to get up and keep going when he's getting beat down. And so listen, we'll never know the exact reason. You're right about that, Jerry, but I think there's some things that play a factor in these decisions today across the landscape of college football that they did not have just 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I would say in the day with Coach Bowden, he would have never told us why. When there was the big controversy, is it Casey, is it Brad Johnson? Bobby was going to start who he thought he was going to start, and he wasn't going to explain it to nobody.
Yeah, well, the fans didn't have a voice like they do today with Twitter and email and all that. They had to be really mad and either send a moving truck to his house or send him a handwritten letter.
Oh, he got them all.
They got instant access to Mike now on Twitter and everything else. So
Bobby got it every Monday. We had a luncheon, and people would, he was waiting on that question to come. And he says, and he would have a funny answer for it, like, because I said so, or because Ann said so. But he wasn't going to answer it.
Yeah, well, listen, he had a way to disarm people very quickly that most college coaches do not have, and he would have a great answer. So, but yeah, listen, the good news is I think there's some positivity coming out of the loss, which is hard to find. Now, you go to Mike's press conference, and he certainly was not taking any solace about the loss, and there's a lot of reasons why, which we'll get into as we start to go further into the offensive position groups, and then again to the defense. But listen, he wasn't the only bright spot. There were a ton of bright spots, but I think we all agree that after this game, there is no quarterback controversy in Tallahassee anymore. You've got to roll with Brock. You know, because of his mentality, he's going to make some mistakes. He's going to try to force some things. Young guys do that, and there's been great quarterbacks that do that. I'm not saying Brock is great, but I think we all agree that he's got to be the guy moving forward. Anybody want to add to that?
I would agree.
The only thing I would also you got to play Luke at some point, right? I mean, you got to. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that you got to play Luke for two reasons. One, you want to get a little feel for him, and you can use him in 4 games without burning a red shirt. Yep. But the other thing is with Luke, with Brock's mentality, Luke is going to be starting a game this year. There's a very high probability he's going to have to come in and play an extended period of time.
Yes, with his mentality and the offensive line he's playing with, yes, there's a very good chance.
Yeah, he's going to get his chance.
Yeah, listen, and I think, and I guess with where you are now in the season, and Mark, I'll defer this question to you because you are a former major college football coach. That's something none of us have on our resume. This season to make a bowl game is going to be very challenging. You got to win five of your last 6 to qualify for a bowl. You got some difficult games in there, particularly with the way this team is playing. This also gives Mike a chance to, as Jerry and Bob said, get Luke in the game and kind of see who you like going into the spring.
Yeah. So is the question, how do you keep Luke happy? That's the question. And we're in this new era of college football. It's something that obviously, in my era, we never had to really deal with. And so, but here's the thing, Luke, like you guys already said, Luke's going to get his chances. Luke, we're going to have to depend on Luke, and he's got to accept that role short term moving forward. And if things, let it play out and see. Who knows? Luke may be even better. We have no idea. We've never seen him. We know he came highly touted. We know he's got elite arm strength, right? Or at least, really, he proved to be really good. Throwing the ball, he hasn't shown it yet, but he may be a gamer too. Look, we got 2 young guys that we feel pretty high on. What situation could he possibly go to that would be really any better, especially with the way guys get hurt and stuff, right? Yeah. He is 1 4th and 9 scramble away from Rock and concussion. He has to play, and now we're down to 1 quarterback in a walk-on. So
I tell you, Mark, the way Brock came up on the final play, of the game, he seemed to get dinged on that play too.
Oh yeah, he was.
Well, I think that was either his hand or where his hand was located.
Yeah.
Could have been a very sensitive area of the male body. So I'm not sure which of those 2 things it is.
Either one of those can hold you out.
Yes, they can. depending on how bruised they are. Yes, that is true. That is true. But all right, yeah. So I have a question about the quarterbacks, but I'm gonna save that for another day because this is supposed to be despite the loss, a more positive podcast, because we did find a little bit of a silver lining in a very great season. And listen,
Hey,
Brock,
can I add some when you have
Yeah.
a break? Go ahead. I wanted to add something to a silver lining.
Go ahead.
Defensively, it was a cluster the first quarter. They put 17 on us, and we outscored them after that, 13-9, or whatever, 13 to 10. But the thing that I've been doing, working on a story, and they had eight possessions into the red zone, and that's a problem. We lead the country in most opportunities in the red zone, 28. But there were 8 of them in that one game. They had scored 1 touchdown, kicked 5 field goals, had 2 block punts, where Clemson was averaging 10.5 yards a play in the open grass. They were averaging 1.81 in the red zone. Now, there's something to be taken from that, and I'm not sure.
I said it Saturday. I said it Saturday. When we play our base defense, where we're playing, that match coverage, where we're pattern reading and doing all that kind of stuff. It's almost like man coverage, and we play with light boxes, and we're susceptible to quarterback runs. If we're not exactly gap sound, that big runs break, quarterback runs. We don't cover very well, even when we do match up. When we did have negative plays on defense, it usually happened in some kind of pressure package. It usually happened when we were bringing 5 or 6 guys. And my question on Saturday night was, why don't we do that on the other side of the 50 more often? Mix it in. I'm not saying do it every down,
right,
but I am saying mix it in on first down some, mix it in, do it on the other side of the 50 some. And, I haven't charted it. Maybe we did, but and weren't as good. I don't know. But it seemed to me that every time we had a negative play or a big stop or something like that, it was around some kind of pressure package. And that's the kind of guys I think we have, see ball, get ball. If we're thinking too much. Here's the other thing, Jerry. Clemson didn't do what other teams have done to us all year, right? So, line up one way, shift, motion, get a guy, sneak a guy out, from the other side of the formation, something like that. Clemson didn't do any of that stuff. And which I'm sitting here going, thank goodness they didn't, because that had gives us problems all year. They played pretty vanilla as far as offense goes, and because they didn't have to. And I think in the third quarter, Dabo was going to make a statement and try to jam it down our throat with Maffa, and tried to do it and kind of ran into some long down and distance situation. We finally stopped him on got some TFLs and got him in some third down situations that we were able to stop him when we got closer and held him to field goal attempts.
Yeah, Moffitt got almost all his yards on that one run.
Yes.
Well, he had a little less than half his yards on one run, and that one run was a backbreaker. If you ever thought Florida State was in the game, and since we've completely gone through skipped the offensive rundown for the show, listen, Florida State, Clemson was. They dominated the defense. They did play very good red zone defense, but Clemson had 9 scoring opportunities in 11 series, scored on 7 of them, should have left at least 13 points off the board. And just like the Georgia Tech game, when it came down to the fourth quarter and they needed to run the ball to win, that's exactly what Clemson did. Credit to Florida State for blocking those 2 field goals, but this defense did not play well at all. You go back to that 59-yard run that you're talking about where he got half his yards. Go back and watch that tape. The safety, the defensive end, and the linebacker, play side linebacker that's lined up in the B gap and supposed to have the A gap runs out of the play. And there was a reason that's gash, is because this defense doesn't play good run defense. And listen, when you
had 2 guys in one gap. I don't know if the safety was supposed to fill it or the linebacker was.
Listen, this will be an anomaly in Clemson's football history. They will never be in the red. They will never have 9 scoring opportunities again and only score 29 points.
I agree with you, Pat. But what's funny is last year's Clemson team had that problem. Remember, they got in the red zone a lot, and they kept fumbling it down there.
Well, the bizarre thing to me was he set up that he he settled for a field goal on their 26 point, going from 23 to 26. If you remember, he ran the quarterback sweep instead of trying to pass the ball and be a little bit more aggressive. So and I think if you remember last year, Jerry, in the overtime or right before it, I can't remember if it was the overtime series or right before, as they're going down to assault, he made a curious play call there that they turned the ball over and Florida State won the ball game. So, some of that is
he definitely ran to the left because both those blocks came from the left side. So he was like, well, I'll go for the first down like this, but I'm going to make sure that if we're kicking the field goal, we're going to kick it with our right side being protected.
But I was surprised I was surprised he was not more aggressive on that third down play call. Like put the ball in the air.
He didn't need to be. He wasn't sweating us. He wasn't sweating. He knew we were going to struggle to score. I mean, he was just going to take the points and get out of there.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, let's.
Klubnik made the point.
The worst thing that can happen is if he tries to throw it, somehow something crazy happens. We get a strip sack fumble or a pick six, right? So kudos to him. Take the points and get out of town.
You win the game. Klubnik made the point that when they got in the red zone, Florida State played inside leverage with the corners.
Yep.
And in hindsight, he wished he'd have thrown more fades. So I think that for him to say that means he had an option on those runs. So,
clearly he did not watch the SMU tape on those throws to R.J. Maryland, back shoulder throws right at the end zone. But listen, we'll come back to the defense.
But listen, let me just follow up on Mark's point. I think Klubnik has improved from last year, but I don't want to put the game in his hands if I can win it with a field goal.
No, I agree with you. And like you said, and Mark said, Florida State was going to have a hard time putting 2 touchdowns on the board in one quarter, let alone the half. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can't believe some of the things that we are talking about when we say things like we can't see Florida State scoring 14 points in a quarter. I mean, last year that would have been average, right? I mean, you didn't know what they were going to do last year. But moving back to the offense, guys, Brock was not the only bright spot. It sounds like Mike is committed to the youth movement, and boy, did Landon Thomas have himself a game, led the team in receptions and targets, 7 for 80, 8 targets. Then Amari Williams, who, Bob, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. He had the best hands outside of Kyle Morlock in camp. And, he dropped his first pass against SMU. I'm sure some nerves there. And he also had to dive for it. But then you had Akeem started to show himself a little bit. Now, Andre had a little bit more of a challenge, maybe Andre Otto, than the other 3 guys, because obviously he plays in a very confined space against a lot of large humans. But I thought at times he accounted for himself well. Just your overall thoughts, Bob, on the young guys on offense.
I feel differently about this tight end group than I did in camp. I mean, because obviously coming out of camp, you're going, well, it's Kyle Morlock and a bunch of question marks, and it's now flipped around to play the freshman because Kyle Morlock isn't dependable. I didn't expect to see Amari maybe be a focal point this early. I kind of thought it'd be the back 4 games of his season. You just need more time. But Amari's had great hands. I don't even think he wore gloves in practices, Pat. I mean, he was just catching just about everything thrown his way. I mean, it sucked that he stumbled there in the open field. I think on that final drive, that could have been a good moment for him. When we talk about the yards that the passing game kind of missed out on, it's because of some of those redshirt freshmen, true sophomore moments. I think Landon Thomas missed a block on what was almost a pick 6 to Ashton Hampton. So there are some of these weird moments where you can tell these guys are just kind of puppies being thrown out there. But this is what we asked for. This is everything that I think we asked for as fans and media. We wanted to see first and second year players. We know it's going to be growing pains, but it's part of the youth development. It is the overall storyline for the last couple of weeks for the rest of the year, candidly.
Yeah. Jerry, who stood out to you as far as the offensive young guys played on Saturday night?
Well, besides Brock, I thought Hakeem did make some good plays, and even on the ball that he dropped, the a 50-50 ball. What I really liked was he came back to that ball and high pointed it, instead of just waiting on it to come to him. And he didn't come down with it, which was unfortunate. That would have been a big play. But he's getting better. And as we know, he missed about 5 weeks of practice with an injury. So he's just really played back into shape. I think his ceiling's higher. I was going to note Amari, among the things he did, good hands. He had an important fumble recovery in there too. And unfortunately, we lost the 50-yarder to Benson because of a hold. I believe that was on Otto. That one was.
That was for sure.
Yeah. But he seemed to hold his own. I mean, he doesn't look lost out there by any stretch. He looks like he belongs, at least as well as the others do.
Yeah. I think he gives a little bit more athleticism than maybe you get out of Ferguson or Keandre Jones. I was a little bit surprised Bryson Estes didn't play more, but he's not an older guy, but I mean, younger guy. Mark, you get a tough question. I gave
Bring it.
All right, so FSU is the only team in the ACC that does not average 100 yards on the ground per game. They average 59. They are less than half of the 13th ranked team. They're the only offense in the ACC that does not average 13 yards per game, 300 yards per game or more of offense. They're like either 292 or 278. You'll have to forgive me. I forgot to write it down, but I did look at it. It's just not good. So what can you do schematically? Listen, it can't be – we know this because we saw it with DJU. People are going to learn what Brock does well over the course of the next couple of weeks, and they're going to try to take that away. And it can't be just go back and throw the ball 50 times a game, particularly with his receiving unit, which we'll get to in a second. But what can they do? Can they do anything schematically with the offense? I mean, anything at all. I mean, you saw some of the things that Vandy did with overloading one side, going unbalanced, a lot of those Stanford-type formations that they used to run, and Jim Harbaugh's type. And it's not what Mike does on offense. I understand that, but they can't do what they're doing on offense. They can't do what they're trying to do on offense. So you've got 2 weeks before you go to Duke. Can you do anything either schematically with this offensive line? And listen, we know there's reserve offensive linemen that are not playing. They're not playing for a reason because they're not as good as the ones that are playing, which, wow. All right, Mark, that's your question.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Look,
Yeah, thanks.
here's the deal.
Mark's not going to join us next week.
Right. If I survive. You have to find something they do well. I mean, we're talking about this 6 games into the season, which is crazy, right? And that's just, to me, it's a little bit of mismanagement about what you are and what you got. But all that being said, Georgia Tech exposed the flaw in the immobile quarterback in the passing game, and just pretty much had a blueprint of how to shut down this offense. And everybody pretty much to a T has some, done some version of that. Overload the box, play man coverage. The receivers are not very good. Quarterback is a little sketchy, inaccurate. We stop the run, make them one-dimensional, make them beat you by the passing game, and they can't do it. All right. So we got a spark of life with a new quarterback who is mobile. Okay. We can't do what Jim Harbaugh does because we don't have the tight ends to do that. The tight ends that we do have that are productive are threats in the passing game. So these freshmen are threats in the passing game who are not very physical right now, inline blockers. You're not going to do a bunch of bunch formations and stuff like that to try to overpower and gain an advantage on the edge with those puppies. That's not practical, right? But what you can do is to put those guys in the game and split them out away from the formation. Because if you put them out there, somebody's going to line up over them. They can block by splitting them out and making somebody walk out there, right? That's one way to help the number situation. And if they are a threat in the pass game, which they are,
yep,
that's one way to loosen up the box. The other way to loosen up the box is for Brock to be a real threat in the running game. Okay, there was one zone read where he did the give and the defensive end was crashing and the linebacker was not hanging back for the quarterback. If he would have kept it and ran, he would have had a big play, right? But to utilize his legs in a safe way, really implore him to slide and not take a bunch of hits, but to make that a threat to control the other side, to control the backside, and that can help loosen up the running game a little bit. So some zone read with the quarterback, or even the RPO. He did some RPO things halfway decent, right? And that will loosen it up. And then you got to, look, this offensive line, it's 6 games into the season, you're limited in what you're able to do. Hone in on the 1 or 2 things that you do really well, and then really coach the details out of it. That one counter we ran, it was kind of a high snap, and Otto was pulling across the formation, right? And we had an edge rush blitz coming, and he had no idea, right? He didn't see the guy until the guy was already past him, and you know what? That's inexcusable. That is number one in teaching that play, is that if the tackle's covered and there's a guy outside, you make a call. So when that guy pulls, his eyes go right there to know if that defensive end, when it went inside and that guy was blitzing off the edge, that he adjusts his path to block that guy. That's number one on that play, right? And he had no clue. So that's what I'm talking about. Coach the details, the little things that can happen in every situation. Because if you try to do everything, it's hard to hit all those details on all those plays, right? So whether it's the zone, the counter, the pin and pulls, whatever it is you want to do. I mean, there's all kinds of neat things you can do. I'm watching college football and I'm watching pro football, and I'm seeing guys trapping 3 techniques with wing backs. Yep. that play that Derrick Henry ran a couple weeks ago, right? Stuff like that. I mean, there are unique things, and we were doing stuff like that in the 90s. That was something that that stuff has been there before. But there are things you can do, that are kind of, you build off of. If you're a zone team, you build off of the zone. There's little things you can do. But the bottom line is, you've got 2 weeks to maybe just tone it down in the running game, coach the details, make sure everything's perfect, demand excellence from the offensive line, and then use your personnel in a way that scares defenses. And I mean, that's the only thing I think you can do.
Listen, this team, offensive line and really receivers, struggle to block in space. I get frustrated every time I see somebody run a screen effectively, wide receiver screen, because you go back and watch one of my notes after the SMU game was they need to figure out what drills that wide receivers coach is doing with his wide receivers and blocking, because they block really well. But you go back to that touchdown pass with Clemson on the wide receiver screen where the Maffa comes out, kicks out the cornerback, the guards pull it, and he kicks out the safety. We don't seem to be – Florida State doesn't seem to be able to do that. Do you think maybe they should go to more stretch zone-type plays, Mark, where a hole can identify itself?
Something. I don't care what it is. Just pick something.
Pick a
handful of things and just.
Yeah, I'm just saying. If a man blocking scheme is supposed to hit a certain place, right? Where the stretch may hit outside, it may be a cutback. We've seen them do some, outside zone stretch stuff.
Here's the thing, Pat. It doesn't, and I've said this all my coaching career. It doesn't matter what you do, just do it really well. It all works. But if it's execution, it's coaching the details on every situation. That there's no contingency that can manifest in that play that you can't handle on the field. When you do too much and you leave it to kind of the chance, that's where you run into problems. And then just kind of demand it out of the offensive line. I mean, it really is, because these guys are not bad players. I mean, they're not first round draft picks, but they're not awful. I just think that they could just do so much better.
Yeah.
Hey,
all right.
Mark,
So
there's a question by this Michelle.
Bert, it's Bert Batoli. Hey, Bert, how's it going? We got a question for Mark. How much growth or improvement is realistic for Otto this season?
Well, I mean, look, he was a little overwhelmed at times in this game. You're going to get that with a young player, I guess. I mean, if you don't play him, that's what you're going to get. Does the good outweigh the bad? I don't know. It's kind of a wash this game, but it is a growth opportunity for him. How much better can he get? It's really up to him and his mindset and his position. And do we set him up to succeed? And that's coaching.
Well, I kind of agree with something Kirby said. I was listening. I can't remember. It was after I think it applies to both sides of the ball for Florida State, particularly the offensive and defensive lines, and maybe even the linebackers to some extent. But he was asked, they played some odd man, 3-man front stuff, either against Auburn or Alabama. Like I said, it was the clips happened in the last 7 days. And he's asked about, well, is it maybe the reason they're having success is because something you're doing schematically? And he goes, well, there's a reason we're doing what we're doing schematically. No matter what you think, they have success. He goes, but sometimes what we need our players to do is to whip out a can of whoop ass and start getting after some people. And I think you talk about all the time about blocking and playing offensive lines, a lot about attitude and effort. The same thing for defense. And listen, I think the defense is playing harder. They're not playing smarter. When you watch, there's still some assignment football. Like I said, that 59-year-old. I struggled over this with JP this morning on his show. I can't blame it on the coffee now. But on that 59-yard play divide zone, that's day 2 install type stuff for the defense, and you got guys running all over the place. They don't know where the hell they're supposed to be, and we're 6 weeks into the season. I do think there's a lot of truth to what Kirby said, and you go back to the great teams, the great defenses that Florida State's had, and the offensive lines that you played on, Mark. You mentioned earlier, you guys at times didn't have the most talented guy at every position, but you know what you guys did? Y'all fought and scrapped, and y'all were mean as shit. I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Offensive line is attitude and effort, and it's cohesiveness, it's pride, it's all those things. And I'm not saying these guys don't want to do well. Of course, they want to do well. Again, it goes back to what we said earlier in the year. I think there's a leadership issue on this team, and really, there's something deep down about maybe the investment that some of these guys have in this team being transfers. It looks like it could be a real thing. I can't put my finger on it so much, but there's definitely something lost in the translation about, because Mike says it all the time in the press conference, and really I'm tired of hearing about it. These guys are putting in the work, right? I don't know why these things show up during games. You know what? Again, go back and really objectively look at your process, look how you teach, look how you install, look how you're doing things, because obviously it's not translating on Saturday. There's a big disconnect. And me and some guys were talking this week. We were talking about the hurricane, not the one that's coming, the one that just came. And I remember texting one of my teammates saying, I wonder if they had a hurricane party, because I think it was in '85, we had a hurricane come through Tallahassee one week. And, we were out there on Coble Terrace having a big old time in the middle of a hurricane. And the second I texted that, the guy calls me and he's like, you believe that those guys they can't do that anymore because they don't live together. Right. They don't have those memories. Pat Carter called me. I talked to him earlier this week, and we were talking about that exact thing. And he said the same thing. He said, these guys don't live together. There's that cohesiveness sometimes is lost. And, sometimes that manifests itself in games, but everybody has that same problem. So I don't know why we would be so unique in that, but there's something that's not right in that part of it. And in the offensive line, that is so critical.
Yeah. Well, Mark, I'm pretty sure that every day the sun came up, there was a reason to celebrate at Coble Terrace from what I can remember. And I was just a teenage kid running around the Moore Center. That was a wild place from what I remember. My father's stories of having to try to manage the many problems he inherited at Coble Terrace when Coach Bowden, his off-field responsibility was the norms. I know Jerry's.
Well, there was no social media back then either. So
hey, I'll tell you what, guys, let's take a break to hear from our sponsors. We'll come back and try to wrap this thing up before the Mike Norvell show goes live at 7 from inside Bowden's. But we'll be right back in 90 seconds and wrap the show up and talk a little bit about moving forward from Clemson and moving forward to Duke.
The Backshore. That stretch of fluffy sand just beyond the reach of the salty waves. The place reserved for volleyball nets, cookouts, and the air filled with fun and laughter. Celebrate the Backshore with Backshore Apparel. Grab an amazingly soft and comfy Backshore Apparel beach hoodie to keep you protected from the sun's harmful rays. Or the Backshore revamped trucker hat, a modern twist on a classic favorite. Crafted from moisture-wicking fabrics, ensuring they're lightweight and breathable. Not to mention durable with their unique floating feature. Shop now at backshoreapparel.com. And right now, FSU fans get 10% off your order with code FSU10. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com. Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop.
All right, welcome back to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. I'm Pat Burnham with Bob Ferrante, Mark Salva, and Jerry Cutts. Guys, got one more question from Bert. Bert's got a lot of good questions today, and we appreciate you chiming in, Bert. And thanks, Kelly, for watching as always. Kelly's comment on Coble Terrace, Mark, was if those walls could talk. So,
Hey, Mark, Kelly earlier had a question or a statement about rolling the quarterback out with Brock.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, I remember when you played, McDuffie thought if you roll the quarterback, you cut the field in half for the defense 100%. To defend.
100%.
Yeah, can you talk about that? Because I think a lot of fans, and of course Kelly was a good rollout quarterback, and we did roll Kelly out a good bit when he played here. But
the only way I would, and we did that some, in my time as a coach. We had that one play, but we had guys outside that could win on the comebacks, and we'd roll out and hit a comeback or and we had little things off of that, which is fine in a limited thing. But I mean, you cut the field in half, and so when you roll out like that, you've taken the whole half the field over there. You get the safeties rotating over the top for anything going deep. Your only hope is hitting a comeback or something along those lines, because once the quarterback starts rolling out, it's a cliche for a reason. Throwing across your body, throwing it back across the middle of the field, that whole defense is sliding over to that side. And so not only are you getting safeties, you get everybody coming over there. And it's just, it's every once in a while, it's an answer to, because if you can break it on a blitz. That's right. He had Hester and Hassan. Jesse Hester and Hassan Jones are not walking. There's
two NFL receivers. Yes,
two NFL receivers. Yeah, I don't see any NFL receivers on this one.
Well, Kelly made them NFL receivers. They weren't worth a darn without Kelly.
All right,
Eric Thomas did okay.
Yeah. All right, so Bert, any opinions on whether or not Norvell should worry about preserving Luke's red shirt? My opinion is no. I agree with you, Bert. I think, I think the only reason they would not preserve it is if he got in the game and they thought he gave him a better chance to win than Brock. But at this point, or Brock got hurt, obviously would be the other option. But I would think that they're going to do what they have to do, I think, at the end of the day. But I think in a perfect world, yes, they would try to get out of this season without taking the red shirt off of him. I think one of the shames of the way this season may play out is if they don't get to a bowl game and get that fifth game free for all these kids. And, of course, it's an uphill battle to get there, obviously, having to win basically five of your five you do. It's not basically, it is. 5 of your last 6 games you have to win. So, I agree with you. I hope that they don't worry about it. I don't think you can, and it may be out of their hands because, obviously, Bob, there's rumors circulating that DJU's injury may be more than a couple of weeks, so you may not have him to fall back to. And, listen, this is a strange college football world we live in. I'm not sure he's going to, who knows how that could play out. You know, I don't think has anybody seen Hoydell Williams
when you redshirt a talented kid, you always run the risk you're redshirting him for another staff on another team somewhere in the transfer era, right? So, I mean, you got to do what's best for the team in this moment in time. And what's best for this team in this moment in time, Luke's ready to play. Luke gets game experience, and if it takes 5 games to do that, then you got to do it.
Well, I will say this to you, Bert. There was some talk before the game, and it was coming from people that I respect that do have some knowledge of what is going on with this program, and they thought going into this game that Luke was going to get significant playing time against Clemson, and obviously Brock got off to, I guess, relative to what we've seen, a very good start, and I think Mike decided, let's see what this kid's got. Let's keep it going with him, or he figured out they had a shot to improve on offense, and he looked like he did and played the way he played. I think they just decided to stick with him. But I would certainly think that we will see Luke at some point this season. Yeah, and Bert, you're probably right. I mean, listen, transfer is always going to be – there's always going to be talk about quarterbacks transferring. Listen, it's – you know, my brother's been in college football for 25 years, and he's told me since the portal came up, he goes, whether a kid has announced that he's in the portal or not, they're all checking out their options. That's just the nature of the beast to a certain extent, and I'm sure that's not 100%. But yes, I think these kids are taking in a multitude of things into consideration. And if you're a quarterback, I think part of the consideration, this is what I was going to wait till later in the year to talk about. I think that part of that for a quarterback is what's coming back to your team next year, right? How much of a chance do you have to be successful where you are at? And but to answer your point, quarterback is a different beast in most positions, but we've already seen multiple guys a day at different schools announce that they're entering the portal after 4 games because they played in 4. They don't lose a year of eligibility. That is a thing. It's one of the unknown ripple effects of this whole transfer portal NIL deal. But yeah, I don't have any reason to sit here and tell you today that Luke or Brock is going to leave, but it's obviously always going to be a question surrounding the quarterback position. Any thoughts, guys, on the new nature of that?
It's the reality, you know. It depends who's in that kid's ear, right? And like you said, they're going to check it out, see what they can negotiate. I mean, it's a different world, man. It really is.
All right. Well, we've got about 7 minutes before we need to get out of here, so people can go watch Mike Norvell's show, guys. How do you feel now? As we talk about on Takeaway Tuesday every week, it's a chance for us to reset each week what we feel about this football team, what our expectations may be from one week to the next. You're going to go play a now 5-1 Duke team. I don't know who Duke's got this week, if they play at all. I have not checked their schedule. They're off.
They're off.
All right. So you got 2 teams that are off. You know, how do you feel about first of all, Mark, I asked you this question. What are you doing if you're Mike Norvell over these 2 weeks with the offense and what you've seen Brock do with the offense? And then, guys, Bob and Jerry, just what are your overall thoughts after the Clemson game? Do you feel better or worse about the Duke game?
Well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go recruit some players, because every kid we talked about that had success was a 5-star player. Cam Davis was, Amari Williams, Landon Thomas, you know, Hakeem Williams, Brock Glenn, right? I mean, these were highly sought after players. We need more players like that in the program. So they've got some time to go out and go find some players. That's number one. As far as, you know, what to do for this current team is pretty much like I described on for offense. I think you gotta hone it. You gotta figure it out, and you gotta utilize the weapons they have. Who's dependable, right? Who's dependable? It looks like Hakeem, you know, showed up a little bit. He looks like he can be a big body that's relatively dependable. Malik made a great play. He's hot and cold, but you know, I wouldn't necessarily call him dependable, but he's an option. Ja'Kai, you know, dropped one, made one. You know, he's a dependable guy. But in those young guys, I'd go Toafili, Cam, young tight ends, split them out, and then figure out a way to open up the running game. utilizing all that stuff. You got plenty of pieces to beat a lot of the teams on our schedule and be a more productive offense. But they got to fix the running game. I mean, you got to fix the running game.
How do you fix it, Mark, though, without doing what you said? I mean, you've got to spread the field a little bit to fix the running game, don't you?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Those guys got to be a threat, and you got to make them a threat.
You got to make them a threat. And that's the most encouraging thing I saw Saturday is you got a quarterback that can present the threat.
Yeah, you have that. But here's the other thing, too. You got to make them pay when they blitz, right? I think, especially against SMU, every key down, they brought the house and we did not handle it. Now, I will say the OL did pick up the blitz pretty well. Most of the time I saw them trade off a couple of tricky little blitzes and really did a halfway decent job as far as that goes. And Brock did not panic. That was the other thing, and so took a few shots. And we hit on that one with Malik, and took a few other shots. But look, here's the deal: when they do, you got to make them pay, and that'll stop that really quick. And so that's another thing they can do these next 2 weeks is really have a great blitz plan, going into the game, making sure the communication between the receivers and the backs and the O-line and the quarterback are all on the same page, where to go to the ball with a free runner, how do we, again, the details on all that stuff. Make them pay with the blitz, find ways to open up the running game, whether it's running out of spread or using some, control runs with the quarterback. Even if you do spread them out, and maybe, use the back, not toe Philly to lead block, but use Cam to lead block, right? Yeah. And use that extra gap and get, do some design quarterback runs out of spread, not against the blitz. Get rid of the wide receiver screens. Our wide receivers can't block. That's a waste. That's a waste of down.
I agree with Kelly's got a good idea. I think Kelly, and I've never met Kelly, but I think we'd probably get along. I would do mat drills this week. That might get something going. All right. Hey, guys, I do want to ask you about this because I've been asked about it. I did not pay any attention to it in the press conference, and we'll end it after this because I know everybody's got to go. And I told everybody we'd be off here by 7. So I was on JP's show today, and he mentioned, why did Mike not praise Brock more after the game? And he made a point of mentioning Luke's name in answering the same question. The question was not about Luke. It was about Brock. And so these are people, like the 2 people I was talking to, obviously 2 people who follow the program closely. And then we've got another question. Does Mike why did you? Well, let me ask you: did you notice that, Bob, during the press conference? Did that stand out? It did to me, but I didn't think about it very much. But it was, and the more I've thought about it since I got asked about that by JP, and now we've had another fan that has mentioned it. Listen, I don't have the answer to that question, but yes, it did stand out to me, and now that it's been brought up multiple times. What do you guys think? I mean, is there anything to it? Is there anything you need to pay attention to?
In the moment, because I watched that press conference, in the moment, I'm thinking Mike's having a hard time admitting he was wrong. That's what I said this morning. That was my take on it. My take on it at the time, and I haven't given a whole lot of thought after that. I didn't know that was the thing with everybody else too. But
no, I thought, well, your ears are just too sensitive tonight, and don't worry about it. Doesn't mean anything. And then it got brought up without JP and Nick telling me it was going to be a question I was going to get. And then, of course, now we got more people asking. So I just think it's weird. So I thought about it a little bit more. Bob, any thoughts? Jerry, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think one thing I'll say that George Henshaw and I were talking about this, and sometimes coaches do not like to admit that they were wrong on a player. I mean, that's just human nature. You don't like to admit you're wrong. But it happens every day in the NFL. Every single draft, you're going to be wrong on some guys. When you make as many personnel decisions as a head coach makes, right, you're going to be wrong. And the guys that are successful in the NFL, George was saying, are the guys that can admit it, pay the price, and move on.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to – I mean, there's 110 guys on that team. There's 22 starters. There's a lot of personnel decisions. And for a lot of different reasons are they influenced by a kid. He's not going to class. I don't want to give his ass playing time. He got in some off-field issue. I don't want to reward this guy with playing time. And so, we don't have all that information. But the head coach does, and he's got to be willing to say, yeah, I blew that one. Next man up.
Yep. Yeah. Well, anyway, it was like I said, I thought about it at the press conference, but I was like, well, you know what? I just didn't expect to hear Luke's name in a press conference he didn't play in, no more than I did DJU or anybody else that didn't play in that game for that matter. I mean, it just didn't make any sense to talk about.
Hey, Pat, I think I'll go back to a statement that was made earlier. That's nowadays, a coach has got to be he's recruiting his own team throughout the year.
Every damn day, right?
Yeah. And I know that Mike is in contact with those players' parents, on the regular. And so
that's the temperature of the water.
Yeah, that was probably just maybe a nervous comment or maybe a strategic one to say, hey, I'm paying attention. I know you're out there.
Well, listen, the one thing I don't envy is what they're going to get. All these staffs across college football are going to get hit with about December 7th or 8th, whenever that portal opens up, and having to re-recruit their players and try to recruit the portal, because Florida State's going to have to go heavy in the portal, obviously, for next year. But yeah, listen. But anyway, fascinating conversation as always. I will say this: at least Mike is not in Tuscaloosa today. I was taking the temperature of the water in Tuscaloosa, and it is boiling hot. Florida State's fan base is somewhat tempered compared to Alabama's. Like, they want Kane Womack gone today, the defensive coordinator. They want to send him back to South Alabama, where he came from as a head coach. And so listen, so I think that.
Hey, how about that quarterback from Vanderbilt? He's a transfer.
Bobby is something else, man.
First year transfer in there or whatever he is. And
yeah, I think he played
same thing in Tennessee. Tennessee's going through it too.
I think he came with Jerry Kill from New Mexico State, where Jerry Kill, who's one of my favorite college coaches, he's an advisor there for Clark Lee, got a big win. But yeah, listen, as you guys well know, I have some affinity for Alabama, and what I said after that, I said, Vandy, beat them. There was no fluke required in that one at all. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, listen, I said we'd be off at 7 so we could listen to Norvell. So, Jerry, appreciate you joining us always. Mark, listen, man, Mark is down in Tampa, and before we get off, we'd be remiss without wishing Mark and everyone else that's in Tampa, Orlando, the central part of this state. I can't remember the hurricane's name, quite honestly. Milton. Milton is headed Tampa's way. It's a Cat 5 right now, and you guys clearly, if you're listening in that Tampa area, and I have a lot of friends and people I care about in that area, including Mark down there this week, and I wish you guys the best of luck on Wednesday. Mark, get the hell out of there. That's all I'm going to tell you. Get the hell out of there, and you load up Julie and her dad and get them out of there. But anyway, we wish you guys the best of luck doing through this, and listen, it's gonna hit Florida hard somewhere, and obviously Jerry, Mark, and I all know. And people that are listening to people all over the state. So we'll be thinking about you. Before we go off, please go check out our content out at theosceola.com. We've got a ton of recruiting news coming out of this official visit weekend, 2 official visits. Mario Nash was in this weekend, decommitted from Mississippi State. As soon as he got home, a couple of future casts in for Mario to come to Florida State when he commits. And obviously, Florida State is in need of some offensive tackles in this recruiting class. And Mario is a 4-star guy, very athletic. And then they also had another offensive tackle, Daniel Pierre-Louis, in here this weekend. And Nick Carlisle, a recruiting writer, has 2 great stories on those on the site at theosceola.com. or floridastate.rivals.com. And then, of course, Kurt just dropped his by the numbers. How does FSU stack up statistically at the 2024 halfway point? And I'm assuming that he is doing that compared to last year at this time. Well, we appreciate you joining us, and we will see you either tomorrow or Wednesday. It's going to be a little bit of a different schedule due to the open week, and the guys will have a chance to ask Mike questions tomorrow after practice. So we may come and do kind of our Monday thing again, but on Tuesday. So we'll let you know if it's going to be at 3 or 6. We will put the notifications up on our YouTube channel and obviously the website itself. So thanks for joining us. Have a great night. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Mark.
See ya.
Be safe, West Coast.